Severe weather could cause issues for over 150 million Americans on America's 250th birthday, all the way from Denver to New York City this weekend. On top of that, excessive heat will continue to impact the millions enjoying freedom out there, whether you're at the lake, at the pool, grilling, or watching fireworks. Now, myself and our team are incredibly grateful for the recent growth and support, but I do want to get right into things today as it's going to be a longer one for your 4th of July weekend. So let's get right into the forecast. Jumping into our categorical outlook for today, this is July 3rd, Friday. We do have a 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for areas like Lincoln and Omaha, Nebraska, as well as parts of western Iowa. And then a larger 2 out of 5 slight risk that is going to include all the way from Rapid City through Chicago into Ohio for areas like Cleveland, and then back through Buffalo and even towards Pittsburgh and New York City. So tons of folks could be impacted by severe weather today on July 3rd. And then we have a larger marginal risk that is going to stretch even all the way down into the Tennessee Valley and back through the northern plains and even into the Northeast through Boston. So this is a very, very widespread day where we could see severe weather for large portions of the United States. Now, the good news is that we are looking at only a 2% tornado risk, and it's really just contained to Nebraska, western Iowa, and southeastern South Dakota. So not a super significant tornado risk for today. Wind, however, is going to be our number one concern for the day, as literally everywhere in our categorical risk is in some sort of a probabilistic risk for wind, all the way down through the Oklahoma Panhandle and the Tennessee Valley into parts of the Southeast, back through the Mid-Atlantic, and even into the Northeast towards Boston. And you'll see those 15% values all the way from Iowa stretching through Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, back to New York City, through Buffalo as well. Literally, so many folks are within this 15% risk for wind damage. You'll also see this SIG 1 risk for wind damage out here towards the Central Plains for Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. So all the way from Rapid City back through Lincoln and Omaha. And you'll also see that 30% red area for a 30% risk for wind damage for today, which again, this is for July 3rd. And finally, for today, there is a risk for some large hail, especially back through the northern plains and towards the Midwest here, as we do have a 5% region outline. Hail is not going to be our number one threat today, but we definitely could see some very large hail, especially in Nebraska and South Dakota with some of these initial storms. You'll see that 15% region does stretch all the way back through Des Moines. Now, unfortunately for Independence Day, Saturday itself, you are going to see east of the Rockies pretty much everywhere is within some sort of a light green shaded region, which could see general thunderstorms for the 4th of July. But our risk for severe weather is going to stretch from South Dakota all the way through the Missouri Valley, back through the Ohio Valley, and into the Mid-Atlantic. So a lot of area under some sort of a severe weather risk again on the 4th of July. We have two different main areas though. One of those is going to be in the Central Plains for northeastern Colorado, the Nebraska Panhandle, and western Kansas. And then the other one is going to be all the way back to the Mid-Atlantic for areas like Pittsburgh, New York City, Baltimore, DC, Richmond, Virginia. So literally tons of people are unfortunately within some sort of a severe weather risk again for the 4th of July itself. But just like today, the 4th of July does have a silver lining, which is that our tornado risk is very limited and really just contained to Kansas, where we only have an isolated 2% risk for a couple of tornadoes. Wind is again going to be our primary threat on July 4th itself, with that 5% region that is going to stretch all the way from Denver through the Missouri Valley, through the Ohio Valley, and through the Mid-Atlantic all the way to the East Coast for New York City and DC. You'll also see in there that these probabilities are slightly lower, with a 5% risk for the majority of those regions, and then a 15% risk for some of the more populated regions, unfortunately. And you'll also notice there is no SIG 1 risk or SIG 2 risk on the map. So we're not expecting those super strong damaging winds to 70 to 80 miles per hour, just some general stronger thunderstorms, maybe from 60 to 70 mile per hour winds that could cause some damage on July 4th. Some large damaging hail definitely cannot be ruled out from South Dakota all the way back down through Kansas City in areas like Denver and especially western Kansas into the Nebraska Panhandle. So definitely can't rule out some large hail, but it's not the primary threat. You'll see, again, there is no SIG 1 risk on the map, at least at this moment, for that large hail. But I will say it is definitely possible we get a couple isolated storms that produce that very large hail, especially maybe back towards the Denver area with some of these initial storms in northeastern Colorado and western Kansas. And finally, looking at your categorical outlook for Sunday, for your recovery day after the 4th of July, we are definitely expecting some more severe weather back into the Mid-Atlantic. I know you guys are just getting hit over and over again out there for areas like DC and Baltimore, areas of New Jersey, even towards New York City. So unfortunately, there is no avoiding it for Sunday. We are expecting a little bit more severe weather there. Back towards the Oklahoma Panhandle region, though, we are expecting a little bit more of a conditional risk for some wind damage out there in Texas. Now, the good news is that these probabilities are a little bit limited, as these are only a 5% chance back down in Texas and then up to a 15% chance in the mid-Atlantic. But I will say that these risk zones will probably expand just a little bit, and those probabilities will increase a little bit as things get closer and the Storm Prediction Center gains confidence in the forecast. So a little bit lower probabilities right now, but that's not necessarily going to mean that there won't be as much severe weather. But I will say that we aren't expecting as widespread severe weather on Sunday at all compared to what we are today on Friday and on the 4th of July itself on Saturday. Before we get into all the meteorology, we are going to just take a look at the things you mostly care about, which is when it's going to rain, where it's going to rain, and also how much cloud cover you're going to have through your 4th of July weekend. So what you'll see this morning is we do have a couple storms ongoing out here in Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Those are going to weaken as we get into the afternoon. And by 1 p.m., you'll see just some residual storms and maybe a little bit of a Boeing line pushing towards the general Chicago area here on Friday in the afternoon, but nothing too insane. And then as we go into the later afternoon hours, you'll see some of these scattered storms starting to fire off all over the place from the Ohio Valley and back towards New York. And then you'll see more of these scattered storms beginning to fire off in the northern plains back through the central plains as well, where some of those initial storms could pose that largest risk for those larger hailstones and maybe a couple of tornadoes. As we get into the later evening hours, those storms are just going to continue on. This is by 11 p.m. here this evening. You'll see storms all throughout the northern plains, even back into Canada, and then through Chicago and even the lower peninsula of Michigan. Also some isolated storms near the upper peninsula of Michigan and Minnesota. And those storms out in the northeast will have mostly fizzled out by the later evening hours. Another thing worth pointing out today, though, is that this afternoon in the southeast, you are going to see all of these pop-up air mass thunderstorms that fire off, especially in the afternoon, getting into the early evening hours. And those will, again, be those east to west moving storms that kind of come from the wrong direction, in quotes, because we have that high-pressure system parked over the United States, which is bringing that east to west flow to the southeast. And then we'll continue rolling forward in time with the 6Z HER as we get into Saturday. These storms in the overnight hours will just continue to roll on through, and you'll see multiple lines of storms are forecast by the 6Z HER, plus this large cluster throughout Kansas City and back through Kansas itself. And then more storms through Michigan and New York through the early morning hours on Saturday, July 4th. Even some storms back in North Dakota as well. And as we keep chugging along in time through the 4th of July in the morning hours, you'll see all of these storms just continuing to blow on through New York. This is by 1 p.m. So fortunately, the Ohio Valley looks like it might be cleared up a little bit by the early afternoon. But as we go back through the Virginias and through Pennsylvania and New York, those storms will be rolling through in the afternoon hours, plus up in Wisconsin as well. Maybe an isolated storm up in the Dakotas as well. And then we'll also have some more storms firing off in western Missouri through areas like Kansas City. And those will just continue on. And then our storm risk will really increase back in the Midwest as we get into the evening hours. By 9 p.m., you'll see a lot of storms firing off. Same thing back in the central plains for Oklahoma, Kansas, and the northeastern Colorado / Nebraska Panhandle region. And then you'll also see as we get into the latest evening hours back all the way to 1 a.m. on Sunday here, storms rolling through the Ohio Valley and making their way off to the mid-Atlantic. And a larger cluster of storms is forecast to be present throughout Kansas and moving kind of to the southeast. And now we'll switch to the North American model, or the NAM, as we roll through Sunday. And what you'll notice off the bat is there is a lot of agreement between different models on the timing and placement of these storms. So there is decent confidence in the forecast, which is why we're seeing those probabilities issued a couple days in advance. But you'll notice as we get into the afternoon here at 1 p.m. on Sunday, a lot more storms going on throughout even the southeast, and maybe a line rolling through the Ohio Valley back through areas like St. Louis and into towards Oklahoma City, with more storms going on in the Midwest as well. These will continue as we roll through the evening hours on Sunday, and you'll see here by 1 a.m. on Monday, we'll have more storms back to the mid-Atlantic. So these storms will just continue to blow on towards the southeast, with maybe a cluster of storms that fires off back towards Virginia and Maryland, back towards like Baltimore and DC. And then finally, the furthest that we will make it is 1 p.m. on Monday, where the forecast is much more uncertain here with the NAM, but it is expecting some showers and thunderstorms for really a lot of the country throughout the southeast and back through the mid-Atlantic, and even stretching towards the northeast. Now, if you're like me and you're going to be spending the 4th of July weekend outside as much as possible, here's a look at what the cloud cover is going to look like as we get to the early afternoon hours today on Friday. You will see all the way back towards the mid-Atlantic, a lot of those clouds kind of clearing up in the afternoon, so you'll at least get some sunshine, even up through Boston and New York as well. And then out in the central plains, some of these clouds breaking up there as well. In Kansas City, might be a little cloudy. Towards St. Louis, where I live, might be a little bit cloudy, and even back through the Midwest, lots of clouds present here by 3 p.m. And then those will increase as we get into the evening hours, as some of those storms begin to fire off really throughout the entire country, from the northern plains all the way back through the mid-Atlantic, even in the southeast and towards Oklahoma and Arkansas. You'll see a lot of clouds present. And then rolling forward into the 4th of July itself, as we continue on in time here, you will see that by around the early afternoon hours on Saturday, we are forecast to see quite a bit of clouds for basically the entire eastern half of the country. So I'm hoping that a lot of these will break up, especially in the southeast. We might see a lot of these break up for those of you down there, which is nice. Out in the central plains, some of those will probably break up as well. But a lot of scattered clouds in general, some overcast conditions for a large portion of the country, really the eastern half of the country on Saturday. And I will say some of those clouds will continue to break up a little bit in the afternoon hours on Saturday before those storms really begin to fire off in the evening. And you'll see as we get into the later evening hours on Saturday and by midnight on Sunday, plenty of clouds still present. But of course, in the late hours, not as important. We're more so worried about that pool time. And now for your cloud cover as forecast by the NAM for Sunday, you are going to see in the early morning hours, a lot of those clouds are going to start to break up a little bit. By 1 p.m., you will see a lot of clouds are present, really from the Central Plains and the Missouri Valley back through the Midwest and even through the Southeast and towards the East Coast. You'll be seeing some clouds. But by 4 p.m., some of those will break up a little bit for some areas. And I'm hoping that the cloud cover isn't going to be as dense as forecast. I don't think it will be, but there will in general be a decent amount of cloud cover on Sunday as well. By the evening hours, those clouds starting to congeal themselves more back towards the mid-Atlantic and the Midwest, where some of those residual storms will still be ongoing. Now, continuing along with things that you actually care about, here's your temperature outlook for today. And if you haven't noticed the theme lately, it's really hot in the United States, for literally the entire United States. Even back up into the Pacific Northwest near Seattle, even up towards the 70s, which, isn't super hot, of course, but all of the southern United States, I mean, literally everywhere from the desert Southwest back through the mid-Atlantic, even 97 in Boston by 4 p.m. today. 101 in Charlotte, 102 in New York City, 98 in St. Louis, in the 60s in Chicago with some of those storms though, which is nice. Thankfully though, this evening, obviously things will cool down as the sun goes down, but by 11 p.m., you're still seeing values in the 80s for a large portion of the country. As we keep rolling into the 4th of July itself, you will see those temperatures, of course, are going to ramp back up, and by 4 p.m. around our peak heating times, on Sunday, you'll see 89 in Boston, 86 back in New York City, so slightly cooler on the 4th of July, less oppressive in terms of the heat, but back in Charlotte, still really hot. 103 over there, 100 in Oklahoma City, back towards almost 100 in Phoenix and Albuquerque as well, and all the way through California. Pretty warm temperatures, but much more pleasant in areas like LA and San Francisco in the 60s and 80s respectively. Even Boise, Idaho getting up to 96 by 4 p.m. on the 4th of July. So tons of heat is going to be present for your 4th of July. So it will be nice if you're in the water. And then finally for Sunday, it is going to be hot again by 4 p.m. You'll see on the East Coast, there is a little bit of relief back through the Northeast though. New York City and Boston only getting up into the 80s. Pittsburgh peaking at around 90. Charlotte this time not getting up in the hundreds, just to 97, which I know I say just, that's in quotation marks. Still really hot. Back in Texas, very hot as well. Maybe getting into the 100s to the northeast of Lubbock. Back towards Phoenix in the desert southwest, we'll definitely be seeing values around 103. But in California, things will be a little bit more pleasant. Back through really all of the Midwest and the Central Plains, things will be a little bit more pleasant on Sunday as well. Even in the Northern Plains, still hot up into the 80s, maybe the 90s for Eastern Montana, but it will be less oppressive. I also did want to play through what our relative humidity is going to look like. You will see by the peak heating hours here. This is at 2 p.m. here today on Friday. These relative humidity values are really not that high outside of the northern parts of the Midwest and into the northern plains, where we've got a little bit more moisture there at the moment, but not quite as oppressive with this humidity, which is nice. As we continue to roll through Friday, those humidity values will jump back up as we get that moisture return and the temperatures drop in the overnight hours. But as we get into the 4th of July itself, by 4 p.m. here, you will see it is going to be a little bit more humid, especially for areas like Pittsburgh, back through Chicago, into the Ohio Valley, even through the Ozarks as well, and down through the Southeast. Obviously, there's always plenty of moisture down in Florida. So a little bit more oppressive in terms of that humidity on Saturday. But of course, like all good things, it will come to an end, although in this case, it's a bad thing, as that humidity is going to jump back up as the temperatures cool down Saturday evening. So I guess you could call it a good thing. It just depends how you look at it. Taking a look at what's driving our severe weather, we have had that upper level ridge known as that ring of fire pattern with the high pressure on the eastern half of the United States. But as we roll through Saturday, what you'll notice is that it's finally going to break up just a little bit as we have a little bit of a kink in our upper level flow that is going to form in the northern plains. And that's finally going to start to work that ring of fire pattern out towards the Atlantic Ocean slowly. Still going to take some time and a couple of more days. But as we get into the evening hours on Saturday, you'll see that upper level flow really starts to break up a little bit as we're finally going to have a little bit of relief eventually coming towards the East Coast and the Southeast as we roll into next week. Looking at our CAPE, which is just a measure of instability in the atmosphere, the rising motion you need for storms, you will see it's really going to jump up in the afternoon hours here today on Friday, where we could see widespread storms for a large amount of the United States, even all the way down through the Southeast, where we're going to have those east to west rolling storms. And then as we continue forward in time, what you'll notice is those values stay pretty high into the evening on Friday, especially back towards the Ohio Valley. So still storms ongoing there during that time, but you'll see this cooler air is going to push to the south back in the central plains by Saturday morning. That's your 4th of July morning, but there will be atmospheric recovery behind that back in the central plains, as you are going to see those values in the afternoon on Saturday back in the central plains ramping back up. And you'll also see more values getting high throughout the Ohio Valley and off towards the East Coast, where again, we could see more of that storm fuel and plenty of storm development on your 4th of July itself. This is by 6 p.m. here now on the 4th of July. You'll still be seeing the potential for some storms. And as we get towards the firework hours, maybe around 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Central Time, those values will begin to decrease. And I'm hoping that for a lot of the East Coast, a lot of you won't have too much trouble with your fireworks on the evening of the 4th of July, but it's definitely possible there's still showers and storms in the area that will inhibit that. And especially back towards the central plains, that probability is a little bit higher as well. And that's going to bring us to the end of today's forecast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy your 4th of July weekend. I know that I will be. Make sure that you stay safe and stay weather aware. Subscribe to us and have notifications turned on. Plus, follow us on all platforms so that you know when severe weather is headed your way, and you can stay safe while you're launching fireworks, hanging by the lake, getting a tan by the pool, or doing whatever it is you're doing to celebrate America's 250th birthday. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we will see you guys soon.